First Nations, which is located on the west coast of Newfoundland and Labrador. And I'd also like to introduce Thamina Jaferi, the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion with Yorkville University and Toronto Film School. We're both co-chairs of the Indigenous Students Advisory Council and will be moderating today's webinar. We will be having an open panel discussion with members of our Indigenous Student Advisory Council, followed by a question and answer portion. So please feel free to share any questions or comments that you have using the Q&A function below. Next, I'd like to invite Thamina to provide a land acknowledgement.
Thank you so much, Jessica. We respectfully acknowledge Yorkville University and Toronto Film School campuses are situated in the traditional territories of diverse Indigenous nations. We reaffirm our responsibility to increase awareness and understanding of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples and colonial legacy, and commit to strengthening our relationship with Indigenous peoples throughout Canada. I'd also like to proceed with a content warning. It's very much understood that today's discussion and content may contain subject matter that various viewers might find triggering. Discussion topics may include trauma related to residential schools, anti-Indigenous sentiment, racism, colonization, violence, among other topics. So we definitely recommend and welcome you to really do what is necessary in terms of viewer discretion and self-care. And there's also the 24 hours a day, 7 days a week residential school crisis line that's available at 1-866-925-4419 for support. And I will drop that in the chat as well. Sorry, I'm just gonna get the number. I'd like to now introduce Dr. Julia Christensen-Hughes, who is the president of Yorkville University, and Andrew Barnsley, who is the president of Toronto Film School, to give opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Jessica and Thamina. I just want to say what an honor it is to be participating in this webinar today. And I certainly feel the heaviness, the solemnity of this occasion. As we all come together to move towards truth and reconciliation. I also want to thank Lois for her such a moving prayer, words of opening. Thank you, Lois. They moved me deeply, as did the brief conversation that I was able to have with the panelists while we were preparing to come live. And I just really want to thank the students for participating in this webinar today. And I say that knowing that this must be such an incredibly difficult week for all of you with all of your responsibilities, all the people who are counting on you. And I thank you for taking the time to join us today and to engage in this really important process. So I guess what I'm supposed to do now is just talk a little bit about Yorkville University and the journey that we've been on. And when I share some of the steps that we've been taking towards truth and reconciliation, I offer them as just the beginning of a journey. I'm proud of the steps that we've taken recently through the amazing leadership and advocacy of people on this call, but I fully recognize that this is just the beginning of a journey of learning and future commitments. One of the things that I had the pleasure of sharing at my monthly town hall yesterday was the development of a certificate in Indigenous education. And that comes to us from our Faculty of Education. We're running a pilot this January where we are funding 15 places in the program, with the idea that we have developed a program in consultation with Indigenous scholars, Indigenous leaders, heads of band council, as well as people from government. But we're inviting them to participate in this certificate as we continue to co-develop it. We see this as an incredible opportunity for learning that will inform our educational practices within inside Yorkville University, but we also hope far beyond, providing an opportunity for education across Turtle Island. Of course, the students who are joining us today, this is a recent initiative for us to have a student advisory council, so we can hear firsthand about your experiences, your recommendations for how we can continue to improve the education that you're receiving and make sure that you are experiencing that in a supportive and dignified and thoughtful way. We are committed to decolonizing the curriculum. And in fact, we recently endorsed 10 signature learning outcomes that will apply to all YU and TFS programs. And embedded within those signature learning outcomes is a commitment to teaching all of our students the knowledge and the skills and the values they will need to be able to demonstrate a deep understanding of the impact of colonization, the importance and steps that can be taken towards reconciliation, as well as concepts of DEIA and sustainability. And so we have embedded in our commitment for the learning that we will provide, again, all of our students, regardless of program. Again, we've recognized we have work to do now in honoring that, but the commitment has been made and the work has begun. I was also very proud to announce earlier this year an Indigenous student bursary of 25% for all qualified students from First Nation, Métis, and Inuit communities. And so I'm very, very pleased with that. And then just yesterday, able to announce that we will make September 30th, the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, an ongoing permanent holiday for the staff of YU and Toronto Film School. And I love the notion actually of declaring the week, National Truth and Reconciliation Week, so we can have educational opportunities across the week, culminating in a day where people can really attend to their own needs and have moments of self-reflection and opportunity for regeneration, however one might choose to do that at the culmination of the week, and just really recognizing the emotional burden that these topics can cause. So with that, I just want to say just a sincere thank you to Rebecca and Erin and Charmaine for being with us here today, for participating on the advisory council. I look forward to what I'm personally going to learn, how you can help guide us as I said, as we take additional steps on this absolutely critical journey. I thank you for your courage and resilience. I also want to thank again Jessica and Thamina for their leadership, making all of this possible. And again, Lois, for your very moving words. Thank you. I think I now turn it over to Andrew.
Thank you, Julia. Well said. I echo Julia's sentiments, and it's an honor and a privilege to be here at this important event to commemorate National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Similar to Yorkville University, Toronto Film School has a strong commitment to ensuring that Indigenous voices are included and amplified in our community, especially when it comes to the creative industries. Indigenous students at Toronto Film School are encouraged to express and share their own powerful and unique stories, as Canada is all the more richer for it. It's of great importance to us to foster an environment where Indigenous peoples feel like they can bring their whole selves into the classroom and work. Today, we listen with great respect to the history and experiences of Indigenous peoples who were profoundly impacted by the painful colonial legacy and trauma of residential schools. We remember those Indigenous children who did not make it back to their families as a result of anti-Indigenous racism and violence. Thank you to the Indigenous participants of today's panel for sharing their stories today. It's our hope that this is one of many steps towards healing and reconciliation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia and Andrew. for speaking about the meaning of this day and what it means for Yorkville University and also Toronto Film School. Next, I'd like to invite our panel guests to provide an introduction. So our first panel guest is Rebecca Brackett, an MECP student with Yorkville University.
Okay, my name is Rebecca. I'm Blackfoot. I come from the Piikani Nation. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm currently living on South Tumuk, the Salo Nation near the Chiacton, Suwali, Sumas, and Nooksack First Nations. I'm currently in the Master of Arts in Counseling Psychology program here at Yorkville University. And I also work at the University of the Fraser Valley as an Indigenous coordinator, where I support Indigenous students from all of Turtle Island. I am also an artist and serve as a senior board member for the Abbotsford Art Council, where I advocate for Indigenous artists within the Fraser Valley. I have lived on both coasts in both Nova Scotia and British Columbia. I'm also a millennial scoop survivor, which is an extension of the 60s scoop. And I really believe that using the term millennial is integral in showing that the practice of removing children, Indigenous children from their Indigenous homes went well beyond the 60s. So my adopted mother is Burmese, she was born in an internment camp in World War II, and my father is Irish, who is from Nova Scotia. I reconnected with my family from the Piikani Nation after the government opened my sealed records, and I was able to meet with my family when I was 19, and I continue with a relationship with them today. I live with my supportive husband, Sean, and our two cats, Thorn and Francis, and our dog, Friday. I believe that I have a strong a responsibility to be present, to lend my voice and advocate for the Indigenous students and artists. I have lived experience as an Indigenous woman and also as a student, and I want to help the future students navigate a path that can be full of barriers and challenges when going through university. And so moving forward with my degree, I hope to become an Indigenous counselor within the Fraser Valley. I'm really grateful to be here, and my hands go up to each one of you for sharing this space today. So thank you so much for having me.
Well, Lala, Rebecca, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction and for sharing so much about yourself. And it's so impressive to have you, and we feel so fortunate to have you as a member on our Student Advisory Council. So thank you. Our second panelist is Erin Fox, and Erin is also an MECP student with Yorkville University. So I'd like to pass it over to Erin to provide an introduction.
Well, Oki, I'm also from the Blackfoot Nation, so it's really neat to have Rebecca and Charmaine actually all from the Blackfoot Confederacy. And it's been a pleasure working with them and all of you as well. I'm a student of the Yorkville University Masters in Arts and Counseling Psychology program. I've finished my coursework and currently am doing my practicum at my on my reservation with the Blood Tribe Department of Health and the wellness program here. So it's been really interesting in just the last month or so to be able to be working directly with my Indigenous people. It's brought a lot of the issues and a lot of the purposes of truth and reconciliation to the front lines, to my mind as I've been able to work and see it firsthand here. And my background is in family therapy and counseling previous to this, but this is the first time I've been able to work exclusively with members of my own Indigenous tribe. And it's been a wonderful and eye-opening experience so far. I've been really excited and interested to work with this panel and this advisory council, because I think we talk about this idea of sphere of influence. And oftentimes as a counselor or as a student, we have a sphere of influence that's more surrounded those that we come in contact with, our classmates, maybe our professors, those that we work with and that type of thing. But the role of indigeneity and also of, you know, working with those groups that have been marginalized is so important, that being able to participate in a council like this provides us with the opportunity to have a larger sphere of influence and maybe help those that are in the universities and those who are watching and those who go through programs and the policies of these universities to be able to have a greater understanding of truth and reconciliation and, you know, cultural responsivity in general. And so it's been a real pleasure for me to work here, and you know, that's just kind of my background is I've grown up on this reservation, and I've seen the effects of colonialism in my life, and I'm happy to be back here working with this group and hopefully learning as much as I can share in this opportunity.
Thank you, Aaron. Again, a very impressive background as well. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm sure you will make such a wonderful counselor and such a wonderful addition to the MECP program, and a wonderful addition to our Student Advisory Council. So thank you for joining as a panelist today as well. Our final panelist guest is Charmaine Scow. And Charmaine is experiencing a little bit of technical difficulties. Actually might have joined, but I'll do an introduction, and if she's available to speak, that would be wonderful. But if not, she may be able to join us later. There's a little bit of technical troubles right now. So Charmaine Scout is a member of our Indigenous Student Advisory Council. Charmaine is currently completing the Designing for Fashion program with Toronto Film School. And Charmaine is a very talented artist. She creates Indigenous jewelry and fashion, and she's a proud Blackfoot woman from the Lethbridge, Alberta area, as well as similar to Aaron, she's from the same nation. Charmaine just recently started her program this year with Toronto Film School, and she's very excited to continue pursuing that and also incorporating Indigenous fashion within her studies as well. So next, I'd like to, I guess, as many of you have probably noticed, we're all wearing orange. So all the panelists and our presenters. So this particular T-shirt that I'm wearing is actually sold on the Yorkville University website, and the design was created by artist Chanel Trainer Matisse. And the design symbolizes protection, support, and love. A portion of all the sales from the orange T-shirts go to programs and organizations designed to help support survivors of residential schools. And next, I'd like to share a short video of Elder Phyllis Webstad explaining how Orange Shirt Day originated in Canada.
Oh, shoot. Wade Wahwadep, Phyllis Webstad, Squest, Strachum Chatstam Slakwan. I'm speaking to you today from Shawetmach, the land of the Shuswap people in Williams Lake, BC. I'm third-generation Indian residential school survivor. My grandmother attended for 10 years from 1925 to 1935. All of Granny's 10 children, including my mother, attended for 10 years from 1954 to 1964. I attended residential school in 1973-74. We all attended the St. Joseph Mission Indian Residential School, simply called the Mission, located just minutes from Williams Lake. My son also attended the last operating residential school in Canada when it closed in Saskatchewan in 1996. To tell my story, I was living with my granny as a child, and when I turned 6 in July of 1973, Granny took me to town to buy me something new to wear for my first day of residential school. I chose a shiny new shirt. It was bright and exciting, just how I felt to be going to school for the first time. When I arrived at the mission, my shiny new shirt was taken away. No matter how much I cried and wanted it back, no one would listen. I never wore my shirt again. Thoughts of home and Granny's garden, fishing for salmon on the Fraser River, are all memories that helped me through that year at residential school. Although the mission remained open until 1981, I never returned. I was able to attend a one-room schoolhouse just minutes from Granny's house in Dog Creek. The memories of that orange shirt being taken away and the lack of caring by those who controlled us kept me from wearing orange for a long time in my life, as the sight of orange would trigger memories of my experiences and the effects of my life from attendance at that school. I told my orange shirt story for the first time in April 2013, when preparation for when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission came to Williams Lake. Those involved with the event decided to honor the orange shirt as a symbol of the effects of residential schools and the need for Every Child Matters. Originally, Orange Shirt Day was focused on the Caribou-Chilcotin region, but thanks to social media, it continues to grow and have a life of its own, and has grown into what it is today. My orange shirt story is not unique. There were 150,000 children that attended the residential schools across Canada, and they, or their families, all have a story to tell of that experience. And now, with the recent news of the confirmation of the 215 children announced at the Kamloops de Shawetmach on May 27, 2021, another experience from those schools is brought forward. I, like many Canadians, have felt the emotional impact of those findings. But for the survivors, we have always known about the children who died in those schools. This is why I say confirmation instead of discovery. Even so, when I first heard, I felt like I had lost a family member, and that's how much grief I felt. There are many more residential school sites to be searched, and the number of missing children and unmarked burials will continue to rise. I'm still grappling for a way to make sense of it all and wondering how we are going to get through this. My thoughts and prayers go out to the families, to everyone across Canada experiencing this unimaginable emotional pain. The missing children have awakened all of us to the reality of the history of this country. This year marks the first year of a National Day for Truth and Reconciliation and National Federal Statutory Holiday on September 30th. A day for thoughts and discussions on remembering, recovering, and reconciling. Orange Shirt Day is a day to have conversation about all aspects of residential school. It is a day to honor residential school survivors and their families, and to remember those that didn't make it. And a day to highlight progress in the reconciliation of Indigenous people and Canadian society. These actions are necessary to bring about healing for the future relationship in Canada. We chose September 30th because September is the time of year the children were taken away from their homes and their families. We chose the 30th because we wanted teachers and students time to settle in, time for teachers to teach students about the history, and time for us to plan an event. When I heard an elder say that September was Crying Month, I knew that we had selected the right date. The Orange Shirt Society has produced a number of videos available on our website for the purpose of teaching the past history and bringing understanding of the Canadian residential school system and its effects on Indigenous peoples. We encourage all to learn more of this subject. In closing, I want to thank everyone for participating in Orange Shirt Day and wearing an orange shirt. When you wear an orange shirt, it's like a little bit of justice for us survivors in our lifetime, and recognition of a system we can never allow again. I want to end with a prayer I wrote in my Shawetmach language. Kia el chba'a, de geld gukbi, gukstach guch pin de sietk, gukstach guch de juchinuch, Gugstach gug the Steithlin, Ell the Southgwa, Ell the Soup, Ell the Griselgston. Gugstach gug Chuchwade, Yuchaminta Ruchwade, the Gulmuch, the Choset. Gugstjam, thank you for caring about what happened to us, and thank you for participating in Orange Shirt Day, the first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation in Canada. Gugstjam.
All right. Um, okay. Um, well, I guess we'd like to move on to the discussion portion of our webinar next with our students, our wonderful Indigenous Student Advisory members. So I guess the first question on our list is, what does truth and reconciliation mean to you? And why are the topics of truth and reconciliation so relevant today? So I'd like to invite our panelist guests to jump in at any time.
I think for me, truth and reconciliation has three parts to it on what it means to me. I think the first time is it's a time to mourn and respect and honor the victims and the relatives of those who have attended residential schools. And I think for me, I think this is important to be able to honor them and have that time to really reflect and mourn. One of my colleagues here, as we were talking about this just this past week, we're having a lot of activities for Orange Shirt Day. And what they said was that, throughout the week we wear orange, but on the 30th, we cry. And I think that's really powerful to me, because it is something that when you go through it and you see the effects of it that are still present in any Indigenous members' lives, it's hard not to want to cry at that. So for me, it's a time to mourn and respect, but also acknowledge the perseverance of our Indigenous people as well, and to recognize that we're still here, we're still thriving, and there's that resilience within us. And I think it's also a call to action, that there's still more to do. And even in the TRC identified 94 calls to action, and many of those in many areas haven't been completed. And so I think as we reflect on it, I think reflection loses its meaning and power if there's not action connected with that. So for me, I think that's one of the reasons why it's important, and it's still relevant, because there's so much more to do, and because systemic racism and colonialism still exists today in our education, in our healthcare system, in many of the areas that we encounter on a daily basis. So that's important to continue to move. I loved what Julia said, in that it's a continuous goal to continue to increase action in these areas. So for me, that's kind of some of the main points for me.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Erin. I'd like to invite Rebecca or Charmaine if you'd like to add anything to that as well.
Okay, well, truth and reconciliation for me means to just move forward, heal, and get out there with the community and the people. Like, I like going to powwows and trade shows. I always attend those, which helps me build relationships with my community and helps me socialize and get myself out there. And because I'm a Toronto Film School student for fashion design, and I'm a creative person. I like it when people purchase and wear my Indigenous handcrafted jewelry. That gives me joy, makes me feel like I'm doing something right. That is also a form of truth and reconciliation because it increases the interactions and the understanding between Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people, if it makes sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. And also, you mentioned like going to powwows. You had disclosed before that, you invite some of your coworkers and friends to attend powwows too. That's wonderful. That's a wonderful step and action as well.
Yeah.
Mhm. And next, I'd like to invite Rebecca. Is there anything that you would like to add as well?
For sure, yeah. So to use the colonizer's language, to me, it needs to actively and sincerely atone for the wrongs that have been committed by answering the perfectly laid out calls, the 94 calls to action. This is a call to all of Turtle Island to answer the calls and to show up. To me, it's to honor the treaties, to the people who went to the residential schools, to honor those people, and to redress the harm that's been caused through colonization. For Indigenous people, it's a time of healing and, like Erin said, a time of mourning. This isn't just a day to wear an orange shirt and hashtag a buzzword and can carry on beyond September 30th. The work starts when you put on that shirt, and it needs to carry on. When Phyllis Webstad told her story of the orange shirt, her orange shirt being removed when she was a child, she said that she felt unheard and that she didn't matter. So to wear that orange shirt is to say, I'm listening and you matter. So the topics of truth and reconciliation are so relevant today because people have finally stopped and they're listening. And I remember when they found those 215 children and it was first on the news, I remember thinking that this isn't news for Indigenous people. Like we've known this, but I was waiting and just watching for how the world was going to respond. And it took on my algorithm, it took 20 minutes later, I saw that UBC first lowered their flags, and then other universities followed suit, and other places, corporations and people wore orange shirts and placed little shoes on steps of churches. And I met with my elders and we all wept, and I listened to their stories and just continued to weep. But they told us that crying is cleansing and healing. And that's something that I can hope for all Indigenous people of Turtle Island, is that through this time we can heal and move forward with strength and knowledge that we do in fact matter.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was so beautifully said by all of you. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing. So I'm going to take the next question, which is more about how can truth and reconciliation be implemented in the classroom? So we'd love to get your ideas on what you think is important for us as well, in our community of educators and staff at both Yorkville University and Toronto Film School.
It would be great to integrate more Indigenous artists and knowledge into the materials we learn. We have a history about fashion, and 100 years ago, we made our own makeup, buckskin dresses, like wedding dresses, boar shirts, and those are a part of our fashion too. So it would be great as fashion students to get the opportunity to learn about Indigenous fashion and history. And
Absolutely.
yeah, I recently took an introduction to fashion introduction to fashion industry, where we learned about the history of fashion in terms. I also took a sketching course where we learned how to do croquis, like how to design clothing for the croquis. And I think it would be wonderful for an example to put maybe a buckskin wedding dress on the croquis, so it would be visible. Like the visibility of Indigenous fashion will help people learn more about fashion history and fashion. And when I was a little girl, I used to make my own clothing. I used to love it. It made me want to make Indigenous dresses to show my culture. And I've always wanted to have fashion runway shows to display our ways of our fashion and our culture and the way we used to dress back in the day. And yeah, I think that would be a good way to implement truth and reconciliation into the classroom, like a form of it.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Charmaine. And I'm so happy to hear that you found a place at Toronto Film School to really explore that passion as well and really display and celebrate your culture and your identity. I don't know if Erin or Rebecca, you had any thoughts on how to implement truth and reconciliation in the classroom?
Yeah, I can go. So this truth and reconciliation could be implemented in the classroom through the process of indigenization, which I see is happening, which is really great. Every single classroom should have some Indigenous content in the classroom. And it starts with a land acknowledgement, just like the one we had today. Whose land are we on? What territories, nations, bands, tribes are we near? Instructors should take the lead on this and share their own genuine land acknowledgement. And if they're unsure of how to do this, just ask. There's always people who are willing to help out. For me, I'm on South Tamuk, the Stelo Nation, and having an Indigenized strategic plan. So that includes the consultation of elders, knowledge keepers, and allies to implement Indigenous ways of knowing and Indigenous knowledge into the curriculum. It's crucial to answer to that call, those 94 calls. I also recommend providing Indigenous supports to the students, such as having, just like an Indigenous coordinator or an elder on residence, somebody that we can turn to during these times. And I also recommend hiring someone who can help teach and consult on these matters, that can help, that other faculty and staff can turn to, and if they don't know, somebody to lead them. These supports are so important because we, the Indigenous students of these institutions, we're essentially giving our trust to a system that nearly destroyed our people and culture. And that's a big ask for all of Indigenous students to come back to a place of learning and say, hey, this is a place that we want you to trust us, and we want you, and we care about you. So yeah, I think those are some steps.
That's great. Thank you so much. I think you've given us a lot of critical points, especially for educators and those of us who are settlers, to really look at what part we play in making a more inclusive classroom for Indigenous students. Erin, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah. First of all, I love what my panel mates have said so far. I think those are excellent ideas, and it really brings to attention the idea of tokenism. And tokenism is this concept of where things are done to look like they're on board with the cause, specifically with regards to social justice and cultural responsibility. And I'll say right now that as a marginalized member, we know when it's tokenism, we know when it's sincere, and we can tell when something is done, whether it's in the classroom or by an entity that is done to kind of appease because it's the culture, pop culture, or because it's the new thing to do. So I think for me, this idea of how to avoid tokenism within the schools, I mean, both my panel mates have given some excellent suggestions. And I think that so far what I've noticed in the program at YU is it's done a better job than every other school I've ever been to. So I think that's needs to be acknowledged and continue that trend. I think it's important that these principles of truth and reconciliation are integrated, as Rebecca said, in all of the coursework that we do. That there's always something there that has a nod to the indigeneity and where we have come from in this nation. And so I think if that's something that is there, I know that that's going to be an influence. But in addition, I think tokenism can be minimized by acknowledgement, training, and hiring practices of the university for their faculty and staff. And I think those faculty and staff that really understand the importance of this. And I think it means more than just to Indigenous people. When you're making accommodations and when you are aware of the circumstances and issues related to Indigenous people, this spreads out to all marginalized groups. And I think this is a way to become an all-inclusive program that works towards social justice, specifically with marginalized groups. So I think in addition to everything else that's said, I think if we can kind of work to minimize tokenism and awareness and sincerity in our programs, that's something that's going to have a lasting and noticeable effect for those students and participants that are Indigenous.
Thank you so much, Erin. And I really appreciated your talk about how truth and reconciliation benefits both Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples, especially in terms of their interactions and just understanding each other better. So thank you so much for that. I'll pass it on to Jessica for the last question.
Thank you. So our last question is, what actionable or tangible things can people do to implement truth and reconciliation? So this could be very broad. It could be on an individual level, it could be within the classroom, or even within the community.
Well, for me, I would say, like, whenever you see an elder, just acknowledge them and respect them. Maybe hold a door open for them, go get 'em a coffee, offer them a tea, and just listen to what they have to say. If they have a story to tell you, just sit there and listen and hear them out and hear what they have to say. Because sometimes through their stories, you can learn like lessons and good morals to their stories, and like I've learned a lot through listening to sitting and listening to my elders. Like, for example, the birch tree. I found out that those are the only trees we're actually supposed to be using to make teepee poles, and no other tree. And I learned that through listening and sitting and listening to an elder. And that's how I see it, as like building communities and relationships with like non-Indigenous people and like Indigenous people, and with our elders, just like sitting there and listening and just acknowledging them and respecting.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think we can all relate to that, as Indigenous people, of, valuing our elders and learning from them. And sometimes, it could be a small piece that you take away that's really important. I'd like to, Erin or Rebecca, if you guys have any thoughts you'd like to add, we'd love to hear from you also.
For sure. So to the individual, I say start where you are, move forward with a good heart and a good mind. Just like Erin said, practices of tokenism, we can tell. So that good heart and good mind really does carry through the actions and words. Do you have an orange shirt, and are you able to attend courses or lectures? I know there's some free courses, I believe it's through the University of Alberta, that are being offered. Take part in those and take advantage of those free courses. Are there any events nearby that you may want to attend or bring your family and friends to? So I personally love to go to powwows. I can learn a lot at powwows. It's a really great place to go to. Are there other ways that you can support Indigenous creators, artists, and knowledge keepers? Do they have social media platforms? Reach out to them through their platforms and follow them. It really does mean a lot, just like Charmaine was saying. And then to the universities and schools, invite elders into your classrooms and to your events, into your buildings, and give thanks by giving an honorarium or a gift. Give the elders an opportunity to speak, and be prepared to listen to them. I've always been told that you'll hear what you need to hear from an elder. So if an elder is speaking to you for 2 hours, maybe that 1 minute is meant specifically for you. So listen for that, and hold on to it. Take care of the elders. Bring them food, just like Charmaine said, give them a coffee or tea, some water, help them be comfortable, to show their appreciation that, they're sharing their time with you. Hold cultural workshops, such as, for example, how to do a land acknowledgement, the importance of a land acknowledgement, learn the place names around the campuses and where you are, and learn about the Indigenous land that you're on, and invite the Indigenous language teachers to share their knowledge. And also start by building bridges with different communities by providing spaces for them, welcome them, listen to what they need. There's really just a lot of amazing creators and artists and knowledge keepers that are all over Turtle Island, and we just have to look for them. And yeah, invite them to be a part of this process of indigenization. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, and in addition to what Charmaine and Rebecca have said, I really love the focus that you all made on respect and honor and learning from our elders. I love that, and I encourage everyone to continue to do that if you have that opportunity. I think for me, the most actionable thing that individuals can do, including all of us here, is to develop genuine allyship. And, allyship really it involves a lot of things rather than just face value allyship with those marginalized groups and Indigenous folks in particular. For me, I think it involves, one, holding ourselves accountable, number one, to the ways that we're reinforcing colonialism. And once we recognize those ways, seek to improve on them. And I think one of the more important things with allyship is recognizing what power and privilege we may have as Indigenous or especially non-Indigenous people, and be able to work towards using that power and privilege as a way to work for equity and inclusion with marginalized groups and Indigenous groups as well. I don't think my friends who are non-Indigenous recognize how important their voice is as well. And I think one of the biggest things with allyship is speaking up. There have been times when, for myself personally, I probably have noticed acts of racism on a weekly basis in the area that I live in. And I don't think people realize just how powerful their voice, especially as a non-Indigenous member, is in speaking up when you see, recognize, or notice acts of racism or social injustice. And I think that alone is probably one of the most powerful ways that someone can show and demonstrate allyship. And so, in addition to all the other great ideas that have been mentioned, I think just developing genuine allyship would be my, an actionable and tangible way to be able to implement truth and reconciliation.
Thank you all for sharing all those wonderful comments and suggestions and tips. I think there's a lot to take away from each of them. I think setting a positive intention and thinking about meaningful actions and meaningful steps is a good way for sure to implement truth and reconciliation in everyday life, just beyond this week and this month and this day. So thank you all for that so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And just before we get into our Q&A session, we actually just want to provide some extra educational resources just to add on to all of the amazing insights that Erin and Charmaine and Rebecca have given us. So we're just going to get that last slide up there, and I'm just going to drop in the chat actually some links to our various Indigenous inclusion sections of the diversity portal. So you'll be able to access a number of different resources, whether that's the Government of Canada's TRC resources, and also some really amazing documentaries as well on various aspects of Indigenous life. Now is the Time is actually a really interesting documentary from National Film Board on Haida totem pole carving and the significance to a particular artist. So I'd really welcome everyone to go and check out these extra resources. So we're going to get now into the Q&A portion. I'm just looking at the time. We do have a couple of minutes and we have some amazing questions. So what I might do actually is take a question from Sandra Russell. So Sandra was really thankful to Rebecca for sharing that crying is cleansing. And at the beginning of this webinar, it acknowledged that trauma related to residential schools and the self-care that's encouraged and advised. And so Sandra is asking if anyone has any suggestions for self-care practices with our learning and work environments and with our families as we move forward in a spirit of openness and healing. So anyone is free to provide any insights if you think that there is something that works for you or that you believe is important in terms of healing and self-care.
It's interesting because when you're as a counselor, self-care is super important in the work that we do, and it comes up in our courses and within our practicum all the time. And I think one of the things that for me personally is important is to be able to have varying levels of self-care. Individually, there are things we can do in our minds and every day that can help us self-care, and that's individual to the person, whether it's like listening to music or talking to family or whatnot. Then there are larger things we can do individually, like seeking counseling or contacting a crisis line. Those are very important as well. And on a larger scale, there are things in society that we can do that help to bring us self-care, whether it's like engaging in panels like this, or engaging in groups, or finding other sources that can provide support and strength for a person as they work through some of these issues or concerns that may come up.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Rebecca or Charmaine, did you have any thoughts on self-care? Oh, sorry. Sorry, Charmaine, you're on mute. We'll just ask you to unmute.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry. Well, for myself, I like to keep busy with like making jewelry. That's how I find self-care for myself, like getting out there and going to like the trade shows and spending time with like my peers and like other people, like other vendors, because when we go there, I feel like I'm at home. I feel like I'm in a safe environment, and I feel like I'm supported by everyone around me, because everyone's just so caring, and like we support each other, and we all talk to each other, and just to see like we all ask how we're doing and everything. So for me, that's like a form of self-care for myself, just beading, making jewelry, and getting to the trade shows and spending time with other people and outside of my home.
that's great. Thank you so much, Charmaine. Rebecca, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. I think the first thing is to check in with yourself, see how you are in the moment, reach out to mental health professionals, just like Erin said, and also reach out to elders. Elders are very healing, and there's a lot of healing that takes place when listening to them. And also set your boundaries with your social media and the news and other things. I know a lot of times with people who want to create change, you just want to push and go, but you don't burn yourself out. Go outside and connect with nature, and especially connect with the land. It's very, very healing, especially for myself. I make sure to go to the ocean at least once a week, and then connect with like-minded individuals as well. I think that's very important.
Great. Thank you so much, Rebecca. I just want to be mindful of the time. And so we have some, amazing questions and sort of comments from, I think, Jay Ecclestone, who's, looking for like Indigenous artists or creators out there. And I think Rebecca and Charmaine kind of said, it's great to explore Instagram and different social media outlets for various Indigenous artists, which I'm sure you'll be able to see that there's plenty of amazing people. I actually just want to take this time to really thank each and every one of our panelists. For first and foremost, Professor Edge, for that beautiful prayer that you provided everyone with in the beginning. I want to thank our presidents, Julia Christensen Hughes, Andrew Barnsley, my co-chair of the Indigenous Students Advisory Council, Jessica Gruchy. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to Erin Fox, Rebecca Brackett, and Charmaine Scout for sharing your heart and your knowledge with us. We're really indebted to you for that. And thank you so much as well to Edison Skinner and Yazan Kalalde, who were at the back end, working all the magic. So we just want to sincerely thank everyone and wish everyone a day of peaceful reflection on September 30th, National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. So I'll hand it back to Jessica.
Yes, thank you so much for everyone's contribution today and for making this such a meaningful webinar event. I know I've taken a lot away from it. I'm sure everybody who is participating in this also has a lot to walk away with, and it was so meaningful. So thank you all for participating in this, and Wilaliuk, which is thank you in Mi'kmaq. So thank you, and hope you have a wonderful day.